Hello, my friend. Welcome. I hope you're having an excellent day. This is Heather. This is the Back to Me podcast. And we are talking today with Christine O'Brien Horstman. That's a long name.
It's a
And-
mouthful.
right? And author, career, life coach, corporate trainer. You are one of those you've done it all type people. Yes.
A bit of a generalist.
Right. And your website is Paper Doll Communication. Is that the name of the company that you operate
Yeah,
under?
that's the company holding name. Yeah.
Right. And today we are talking coaching yourself through crisis and self-care and managing chronic stuff.
Yeah.
Chronic stuff, right? Did I get all that right? Whew. Wow. So I'm super curious because your book is called, yes, my friends, she's an author. She wrote a book, a real live book. It's called Deal With It Doll, right? Maybe
Yeah.
that's where Paper Doll Communications comes from.
Yeah. So I just, I named my company Paper Doll Communications really just for my own joy. It's not really following your best, consulting advice. But it just brings me joy. And I felt like it set the tone for sort of the energy I bring to the table as a coach.
That's awesome.
And when I first was building my list, I did a lot of in-person events. And if you have a big coach that says, a big sign that says life coach, people are like preconceived, think they do or don't have any interest. But when it have this big, happy paper doll communication with this fun, sort of retro looking girl on there, people stop.
Right. Yeah. If you're at an event and you have life coach, people avert their eyes and go
I'm
by.
fine.
Oh, maybe it was smart. Maybe we should all take a chapter from that book. Oh my goodness. And the Deal With It Doll is, so you wrote this book. Well, first of all, let me back up a little bit. How did you get into this? What brought you into
Yeah,
this world of coaching and training, and
it's a great
how'd
question.
that
So
happen?
I started my career in sales, heavy relationship-based selling, and I was a regional sales manager and I ran a regional office. And from there, I became a general manager. And a lot of what I did was developing new managers, helping hire not just for my office that I had grown, but other offices. And as the regional manager, I was responsible for hiring, unfortunately, sometimes firing, but all the staff development and training. So that's where really the seeds were first planted. And then as my career evolved, I was a general manager for several different companies, either small companies or regional offices, again, where I wore many hats, which is why I seem to not be able to stop wearing a lot of
Right.
hats. But part of it came out of my own journey with chronic illness of trying to find that balance that I think, well, so many people go through it just with life, parenting, your own needs, your family's needs. How do I make it all work? And for me, that really came through chronic illness of how do I keep fulfilling myself professionally, but in a way that I can manage. And
Right.
working for someone else on someone else's schedule got hard when you don't know how you're going to wake up and feel in the morning. So I took a big step back and said, what am I good at? What are the parts that I really, really love? And so that's when I decided to go into the coaching and training where I can help do what I was good at, but do it a little more in and out, versus for just one organization.
Right. And being able to manage your own schedule when you
Yeah.
have that unknown
Mhm.
makes it takes a lot of stress off, I guess. A lot of
Yeah,
pressure off.
absolutely. And for me, I was already doing a lot of coaching and some training and kind of development programs virtually. So then when the pandemic happened, it, in a strange way, I could work more than ever before because now everyone's comfortable with doing training and coaching virtually. And for me and my health and those physical needs, it really does allow me to work more than ever before.
Yeah, it's interesting, as much as it's in some ways was not so great, in
Oh
some
gosh,
ways
yeah.
it was actually pretty good, pretty darn good because of the rapid way that everybody changed
Yeah.
and just figured out how to make everything work better,
Yeah,
right?
and that's really part of what inspired the book,
Okay.
was the pandemic. I wrote it during the pandemic. I was turning 50, so I had a lot of different things kind of percolating, right, with this milestone, if you will. And I heard myself sharing a lot of the lessons I had learned through chronic illness. Of course, coaching, training, and things too. But I felt like I was really leaning into a lot of what I've learned with living with chronic illness of there is nothing like a health crisis to bottom line things. And that's what
Right.
we were experiencing, right? Collectively, of where we just stop, slow down, reprioritize, determine what did matter most important for each of us. And we had to reframe, right? And so that's really what inspired the book. I lead most of my coaching with career coaching and then tend to back into life coaching with people who have, I'm helping them find a new job and they're like, but what I really want,
Right.
why do I keep doing these kinds of jobs? And whatever it is, right? And then we get into some longer term exploration. But I felt like what makes me really good as a coach is part of what I've learned about reinventing yourself, resilience, and just coping with the curveballs in life. And so writing the book gave me this opportunity to tell the bigger story
Right.
and provide a coaching tool for other people, whether it's a big capital C pandemic crisis or a major health crisis like cancer or death or something, or it's just a little crisis like I'm turning 50, my kid's graduating high school,
Right.
I'm going to be a parent, the transitions and changes we go through in life.
And it's interesting that we have to qualify crisis,
Yeah,
right? It's like,
yeah.
oh my gosh, my crisis isn't big enough. It's like,
Oh, that's
if
such
it's
a
a
good point.
crisis for you,
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's so funny because I started saying that because sometimes people took it as if like, oh, this is only like the sky is falling. But
right?
no, we all go through twists and turns, changes and natural transitions that sometimes do feel really profound. And,
Right?
and sometimes we create some crises of our own making, right? When we don't cope with what we need to.
Yeah. No ostriching, no sticking your head in. Life is going to keep going. You can't ignore it. And, like when we were little kids, hide under the blankets and the
Yeah.
monsters can't get you.
Yeah.
That
Exactly.
doesn't work. I've watched enough horror
Exactly.
movies. And I was just saying, like, crises can be anything. And it's
Mhm.
funny that you threw in turning 50 because for some people that is. My friend of mine is just turning 40. I'm pretty sure he's not he's not really happy about it.
Yeah,
Oh, you
yeah.
poor guy.
Well, it's funny, those milestone birthdays can have an impact on people. And again, I mean, it's like everything, we absorb a lot of messaging, right? For
Yeah,
me, 50 was I couldn't celebrate the way I originally thought I would, right?
right?
It was the heart of the pandemic. And and then it was like, well, what am I marking? How do I want to celebrate? Who do I want to celebrate with anyway? And then just a little bit of that reassessing of where am I with my bigger life goals. And then an opportunity presented itself. I had in my network was a woman who owns a small publishing house and was like, I kind of want to explore some topics, who's interested. And so, then like anything, when you are a little bit more aware and intentional, you see opportunity, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's something that I was actually having a conversation with a group recently about helping them reframe. Because when I, it's interesting you talk about, you're working with career coaching and you back into the life coaching.
Mhm.
I used to do a lot of business coaching, and it always became
Yeah.
life coaching because,
Yeah.
these entrepreneurs and usually in the health and wellness space, and their businesses, the problem with their businesses was something to do with them, right?
Yes.
Not that there was anything wrong with them, but just where they were
Or where
struggling.
they had to grow. Yeah.
Yeah, where they had to figure it out. So, with this group that I was having a conversation, because when I'm working with people now, I've expanded beyond business, and that's why I call myself a real life coach. It's like you got a whole lot of pieces in your life.
That's right.
They all got to work. So, and we got to make sure that the strategies work for your life. So, real life. So, we talk about your physical health, your emotional health, your
Mhm.
connections, your occupation, your financials, and your engagement. And when one of them is not working, then it's going to ripple through the other ones. And the conversation, which I just lost my train of thought because I had so much to say, which always people are going to laugh at me because they're like, oh, Heather, there she goes again. She can't remember what she was talking about.
Relatable.
Ugh. Yeah, it's gone. What were you talking about?
Well, we were talking about the backing into life coaching from the career coaching, and you were sharing that that
Right.
often came out of some of the work you were doing with
It's gone. What did you say
entrepreneurs.
before
It'll come
that?
back. Well, you gave me a thought. So that's really how I
Good.
presented the book. So one half is personal, going through health, self, relationships, and parenting. We're not all parents, but we all have usually people we're influencing in our lives, and we've all someone is our parents.
Yes.
So pieces that we need to work through there. And then the other half is professional. So education, career, leadership, and then wealth or our financial well-being. And so that sort of similar idea to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
If there's a crisis in one part of your life, the other is likely going to suffer, or at least eventually, right? So a little bit like a wheel of life exercise, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. I remembered.
Good.
It came back to me. You were commenting on, I feel like those big birthday markers
Yes.
are that it's, and you can do it anytime, but it's like for some reason those ones are oh, where am I now? I've just hit another decade.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, I find, this is a conversation I was having, they don't stop to say, is this what I want?
Yes.
And like be intentional about what they want in their lives. They're just say, oh, I guess this is life. But it doesn't
Yeah,
have
and
to
just
be.
kind of going along with it. And I think that's what a lot of people realize is that the voice inside our head, the yardstick we've been using to measure success or accomplishment or achievement, was that the one we designed, right? Or
Right?
at large, someone else, something that influenced us. And so those can be points of reflection, and other things happen that cause people to do that too. I think that's part of what made shelter in place really difficult for a lot of people, is that a regular life creates a lot of busyness,
Yes.
a lot of opportunity to sort of avoid life. I mean, we just had a health crisis in my family where my aunt got really sick, advanced cancer.
Oh no.
Like, she's already passed, like from
Oh,
diagnosis to death was 6 to 8 weeks. So it was
oh, I'm
very,
sorry.
yeah. Oh, thank you. And very rapid. But I went out there to help. And then eventually everybody came to be together. And I was talking to my cousin, and we're like, what? My ticket was $400, and it was an hour and a half flight. And I haven't seen them in years.
Right.
And we kept saying, like, life gets in the way of life, but you get so busy and so caught up that sometimes we don't slow down. And when we're forced to, we say, this is important to me. No, this is what's important to me, or this isn't. And we get those opportunities. And sometimes we really do have to slow ourselves down.
And I think there's some people who have crashed, like just charged headlong through that this is what I'm
Mhm.
supposed to do, that they've never even asked, is this what I want? And because
Yeah.
I've talked to people who I was coaching someone last fall who said they didn't know what made them happy. And I
Yeah.
thought, what?
Yep. I had a similar experience. When I do corporate training, I do all soft skills. That's sort of my mantra as a coach, that soft skills are the key to success. And it's our emotional intelligence and our communication skills that make us successful, whether that's personally or professionally, right?
Right.
So most of my training is around soft skills. And this is a stress management class, actually. And I was like, what brings you happiness? What brings you joy? Like, let's come up with a list of something you can do in under 5 minutes, and then other things. And this one woman was paralyzed. She said, I don't even know what brings me joy anymore.
Right.
She's just
So
been on that wheel, a lot of different life changes and stress, work stress. Our jobs are so important, but sometimes we place an incredible amount of importance on them to where it's draining in other capacities. And so that was jarring, but she's not alone by any stretch of the
Yeah.
imagination.
Right. And it is jarring from like it was the first time I heard it, I thought it was couldn't be possibly a thing because my list is almost too long. I like doing this and I like doing this and I
Yeah,
like doing
yeah.
this, right? And it's hard to even imagine that someone wouldn't know. But then when you say, okay, they don't know, well, what have they been doing all of their lives? And like you said, we get caught up in life. We get caught up in these to-do lists. These I have to do X, 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 X. I have to check the boxes. I have to fill in the blanks. And you never have that pause to say or maybe the opportunity to say, this is what I want.
Mhm.
And I have no idea why this movie always comes to my mind, and people are gonna laugh. It's the Julia Roberts movie, The Runaway Bride,
Oh, yeah.
right? Where she didn't even know what she wanted in a husband. She didn't know what she wanted. She just kept
Right.
right, she kept doing what she thought she was supposed to do until finally someone said to her, like, "No, just go figure out your life.
Yeah.
Like, don't do anything." And I thought, if everybody could just and unfortunately, the shelter in place is probably their opportunity, and I'm assuming that not everybody did it. It's like, that was
Mhm.
your opportunity to say, "Hold a minute, now that things are relatively quiet right now, like,
Mhm.
what do I actually like doing? And what
Yeah.
would I enjoy? How do I want my life to look?"
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And, um, and maybe that's too scary for some people.
I think it is, and I think some people may have done the work, and then they're like, "Wait, now I worked so hard to put those pieces in, and now I can't access them. Now what do I do?" And that's one of my other favorite sort of concepts, and one of the other goals of the book is that you need a lot of tools in the toolbox.
Yeah,
Some of the go-tos don't work anymore. Some of it's out of our control, some of it we've outgrown, but sometimes we do have to do the work again, dig deeper,
right?
adapt, right? That's why adaptability it was a key soft skill for many years before the pandemic, but that really hit home
Right.
why employers were looking for adaptability.
And baking skills.
Yes, and homemaking, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's so true. I mean, adaptability, like adjustment, being able to say no, I think was a big skill people
Yeah,
had to develop.
boundaries, right? Like, there was a lot of boundaries, I think, that came out of that. And actually, to your point about, we're laughing about baking, but I felt like one of the gifts of the pandemic was this idea of like people embracing hobbies again.
Yeah,
Again, to sort of stay busy with something productive and healthy and that would bring some joy, um, and activity. But the idea of hobbies. People don't always think about this, but in career coaching, it's something we talk a lot is about interests. And not every interest can or should be fulfilled through your work life, right? And you need other places where you're exploring other facets of yourself. And hobbies are relaxing and recharging in a different way than sitting on the couch and watching Netflix.
yes, definitely. And it's interesting, like, I'm old enough that, I can remember on Saturdays that my husband and I ex-husband right now, but my former husband and I, we would, watch a couple home shows Saturday morning,
Mhm.
and then we would spend the weekend doing something like,
Mhm.
fixing up the garden or, but it was never sitting down watching Netflix because there was no Netflix. I mean,
Right.
it wasn't even that long ago. Didn't really have cell phones, no smartphones. Um, and it was almost like you had more time.
Yeah.
But that's an illusion because
Yes, exactly.
you have the same amount of time. You're just unknowingly maybe, but you are choosing where to spend your time, and it's not always something that's gonna make you happy.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. And it's very easy to fill it, right?
Oh
And
my god.
we have instant access to all these shows, and I'm the worst binger. But it's exactly right. Like, it hits a point where, is that really how I want to choose to spend my time? And we
Yeah.
all are making choices. Yeah.
And I think being able to like not and the generation that has always had smartphones and social media, it'll be interesting to see how they come along because having lived in in a time where we didn't have that, and
Mhm.
it sounds like I'm super old. I'm not super old. It's like it's
No, listen,
still
I lived through that
it's
too.
still relatively new.
Yeah.
Um, but we had more opportunity almost to know to have quiet space in our lives and to recognize things that we wanted to do. And it's true, like I can remember at some point somebody said, be careful about turning your hobby into a your business because then
Mhm.
you might not like it anymore.
Yeah. 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 Then everything doesn't have to be monetized or turned
Right.
into these kind of, achievement oriented, which is such a big part of our culture.
It
And,
is
and that
huge.
was one of the other things. My son's actually he's graduating high school this year, but I mean, I know that was one of the other things where a lot of people I knew as parents were glad to not be in the car all the time, rushing from one activity to another. And I think sometimes as parents, we forget how much more downtime we probably did have as kids compared to our kids now. Or, like
Yeah.
you said, what filled the downtime looked a little different and probably was healthier.
Right? Like that it's almost like that self, entertainment.
Hmm.
If kids now are you're running them from sports to clubs to this to that, and they don't then they won't know how to manage their own downtime. It's like,
Yeah,
"I
yeah,
need to do something. I should be
yeah.
doing something." I can remember when I graduated from university, I became a CPA, so it was a couple of years of studying nonstop for my CPA,
Hmm.
and I wrote my exam, and then I had nothing to do. And evening would come, and I'd be like, "I should be doing something. I should
Yes,
be."
you can't turn. You had to turn that off. Takes
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Luckily, it didn't take me too long to turn it off because I didn't wanna be studying forever, at least not accounting, but it's so interesting that you do when you get into that moving, 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 moving,
Mhm.
moving, even when people go on vacation.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I have a client going on vacation, and she's been so stressed out, and I said, "It's gonna take you at least 3 days to turn it down.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, do not pick up your phone. Do not pick up your
Yeah.
phone,
Yeah.
or you'll just delay it and delay it." And I can remember when I was in corporate that I worked for a VP, and she would check her email every day. I said, "Well, then you're not on vacation, my friend."
No, exactly. And I think that's something that's really detrimental in our virtual worlds. Like it's amazing to have the access and beneficial in lots of ways. Harder for people to turn it off. Because again, I'll date myself now. I can remember going on vacation and someone had like the number to the condo for like some massive crisis. I mean, I worked in the travel industry, so sometimes there really were, bad things would happen in the world and we'd have to react. But no one called me all week. And somehow the office still functioned, everything worked. And then, like you said, now the temptation to check in and tell ourselves, oh, I'm saving myself time later. And in time management training, we call it tainted time.
Oh,
And I love that phrase of tainted time. And the more I share that phrase with people, it does resonate because it's like we're the ones tainting in our own self. So if I am actually supposed to be relaxing and watching a show with my family and I can't control myself and I keep picking up that phone and scrolling email, I just created tainted time. I'm not invested in either place fully.
right?
And that helps prime our brain for distraction, which then creates more of that up, antsy, antsy, antsy.
And you never get to have that moment of quiet space.
Yeah.
And I was listening to, I was on a podcast recently with Janine Kathleen, and her podcast is called uh, Mindset Alchemy
Oh,
Podcast.
nice.
Yeah. And she was talking about daydreaming. I was listening to like some of her earlier episodes, and your brain needs that. Like we think daydreaming is a waste of time. And I was thinking about it, in school, kids got in trouble if they daydreamed, right?
Oh,
You're not
yes.
ch
They're doodling. Oh my God. They are doodling. Right.
but that's when your brain does its best work
Mhm.
because it's there's a book called Be More, Do Less. I don't
Oh,
know if
love
you've heard
that.
of that one, yes, and it talked about the brain science of your brain actually needs that non-constructive, non-problem
Mhm.
solving time to integrate and move things around and make connections. So
Yeah.
you can sit there trying to solve, 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 and this happens all the time. When you stop thinking about it, you're like, "Oh, of course," because you
Yeah.
give your brain a break so it
Yeah.
can do its
No,
thing.
it's so true. It's like when people are like, "Oh, get an idea in the shower." Well, that's because you're relaxed, you're actually physically doing something else, and like you said, now all of a sudden there's been some processing overnight and some space, and I think Einstein's famous for saying that,
Oh, is he?
about having
That
boredom. That
right?
boredom is necessary for genius and
I
creativity. I'm probably butchering that a little bit, but that's sort of the gist of
yeah.
what he said, that without boredom, there is no creation.
I was listening to an audiobook by, uh, Elizabeth Gilbert.
Oh, yes.
She wrote The Big
I
Magic.
love that book.
That book is so good. And was it her is it her in her book where she was talking about she was staring at the window of a train and this story came to her immediately, like, she
Yes,
was
the
just
idea of it dropping in almost like completely forms, if you will.
yeah, and it was just because she wasn't thinking about anything, she was just staring
Mhm.
out the window, and then, boom, this idea came, and she wrote a whole story
Yeah.
right there. I was like, You need that idleness time,"
Yep.
and we haven't created space for a lot of it.
Yeah, and you can't always force it. That was a big lesson I learned writing the book, that, well, sure, I could schedule, I'm gonna work on this, but I would sit down sometimes and it just didn't come.
Right, right.
And I did stop fighting it, and just sort of followed my own flow, because to that point there were other days I sat down and 3,000 words would just come
So
right
then
out.
if you're so I know that sometimes part of coaching is helping people with their, uh, management of time,
Yeah,
time management,
yeah.
and there is that truth to, you can't really schedule I guess you could schedule daydreaming. I don't know, like, how do you think
I guess you
people
could schedule downtime, right?
right?
Or um
And sometimes when you have things in your calendar, a lot of entrepreneurs, it's self-imposed, so it's not like
mhm,
your boss is breathing down your neck saying, "I need this report by tomorrow at 5 o'clock."
yeah,
So then if you're not feeling it, you will not do it. So there's a balance between finding your flow and
yes. Some
pro
discipline, right?
yes, that's
So
the word I
I
need.
had I had to like sort of trust myself that this idea that I am working on it. It is churning around, and another time it's going to sit down and flow different. And that something isn't fully processed yet, and that's why it's not ready to come back out on paper.
Right,
Sometimes I had to still put myself through the paces of like, well, it can't just do nothing 3 times in a row if nothing's coming out, right? So what can I do differently? I'm going to flip it. I'm going to start coming up with the lessons, then I'm going to write it, or vice versa. Or I'm going to just free flow journal for half an hour and see if that doesn't just sort of spark something.
right,
I'm going to outline, or I'm going to work on the mantras, the affirmation piece, right? So yeah, I think there is a fine line between showing up and doing the activity and holding yourself accountable, but also making space and having trust in yourself and trust in the process. Um, that we can't just press the button every single time and everything boots
right.
up.
Yeah, we actually aren't machines.
Right, exactly, exactly.
So your book has lessons and mantras. What's going on in there? Tell me some more
Yeah.
about that.
So at the end of each chapter, I share 10 lessons learned, sort of about the theme, um, that learned through my experience and through coaching. Then I have 10 powerful questions because, as you know, the process of coaching is about asking people the right questions.
Yeah.
Right? We're trying to get them to sort of come to certain things on their own, or understand and elicit more information and probe and spark something in them. So it's asking the right questions. So I wanted people to have that tool of some questions to ponder and some journal prompts, because that's part of where the paper comes from. Part of this is I really believe in the power of putting a pen on paper to clarify our thoughts and our feelings and our goals. So I wanted the whole book to be a tool, but within the book to be lots of tools. And I wanted it to be to where, yes, it flows to read this from cover to cover, and I hope people will, but it also is like, here's where I'm stuck right now, or here's what's on my mind. So I'm just going straight to career and leadership, and be able to just utilize that chapter for some processing and thinking and assessing. And then the mindset piece that I know we had talked about a little bit before when we first connected, that in of itself in my mind is just another tool. I think of affirmations, I call them mantras in the book, which 100% accurate, but
A mantra is just something you say over and over.
People use them interchangeably, and I just like the idea of make it a mantra. I've hung up on alliteration, so but they're positive affirmations. I think of them as little mini pep talks. It's those go-to phrases to shift our mindset, to pick ourselves up, to give a boost of confidence, to overcome some of our fears or anxieties, to just get our brains aligned with our goals, our desires, how we want to show up in the world. So I think they're really powerful. And sometimes, like everything, sometimes one will do the trick, and sometimes you gotta say it 20 times.
Right.
And sometimes you need like 3 or 4 piled together to like get things loosened up, right?
Right.
So there's 20 mantras at the end of each chapter. Also,
Wow.
thematic affirmations for the area that you want to work on, or what resonates most.
You're really prolific.
Oh, you're sweet. I have a little bit of a hyperactive brain, as you're probably starting to notice.
It's like you have 10 of those and 10 of those. And I'm like, how many chapters are there? One. Just
There's
one
8
chapter.
Chapters, 8 chapters.
I interviewed a woman who kept writing 99 ways to, 99 ways. She just kept building on it. Like she's got the 90-day peace project, and then 90 ways to do this, and then 90 ways
she
to
can't
this.
get it. Yeah.
I was like, whoa, holy moly. She
Yeah.
just keeps coming up with more of them. I'm like, wow, that's amazing.
I love it.
And I mean, I like the word mantra. Mantra is awesome. I love alliterations.
Yeah.
And people sometimes their pushback is, well, if I don't believe it, why am I even saying it? Well, your brain doesn't know that you're lying.
Yeah. And it's so funny. I was actually on a panel where we talked about, and I thought it was so interesting because I never thought of it this way, but like the pros and cons of positive affirmations and mantras. And there are some mindset coaches who are like, if you don't fundamentally believe it, you could keep saying it, but you might still be stuck. But my take is this is a part of reframing. It's a tool to reframing. It's a tool to increasing intentionality. And you're not going to get to the deeper work if you don't start somewhere. Right. And like I said, and I think of them as mini pep talks and like easily accessible to yourself,
And if you write them in a way that, so I saw a coach once who thought mantras were terrible because he said it's just pointing out to you what you don't have. I said, well, I see your point of view.
Yeah.
And what's another way we could think about that is because when you want something, like here's a little woo for people, if you need to be like energetically aligned with that. So if I want to, you want alliterations. I've got one here behind my desk. Mine is, I am powerful, peaceful, and prosperous.
I love it. I love
right?
That. Yeah.
So if I say it and I just go, and I just say it, but if I try to feel it, that I am those things, then that changes it. And that makes my brain go, oh, she is. Okay, let's make sure that happens.
But that's right. And then when we start to slip out of that, we say, nope, peaceful. breathe, right? It's so you're kind of this reminder to check yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, taking a little bit minute to kind of get into that space where you're in a little bit more relaxed state can be helpful. I like visual stuff too. So I have visual cues around me that will remind me of my favorite mantra.
That's why I stick Post-it notes along
Yeah.
behind my desk.
Yeah.
So I don't even necessarily look at them, but
Yeah.
some part of me sees them, right?
It's there, and it sort of jogs the memory.
Yeah.
One thing that I share a lot is I think it's a national science. I've been butchering this. I really need to memorize it, but I believe it's the National Science or National Institute of Science. I can't remember. Study though about our brain and our thought patterns, and we have 12 to 60,000 thoughts a day. And so some people are on the higher end or the lower end, somewhere in between. 80% of them every day are negative. That's a
Right.
lot of negative thoughts. And so that's why I also think that things like mantras and affirmations, we have to rewire. We have to talk back to our negative self-talk or negative talk about other people and scenarios in our brains. I think it's really important. And I think managing your mindset is so critical, because it's like one thing you can control, right?
Yeah.
And doesn't mean it's always easy. And
No.
we're not robots, and we're allowed to feel negative sometimes. It's okay to have dark, big, upset emotions sometimes, right? But the goal is what are they telling us, right? How do I pick myself back up? What have you. So we don't want to
Yeah.
stay in that space. But yeah, I mean, I generally run fairly optimistic, which maybe is why, some other people feel differently. But I also think I'm not writing an affirmation like, I'll be rich by the age, I'll be a
Yeah.
millionaire at 62, right? To me, that's not really an affirmation. It's more like what you're saying. I'm full of peace and prosperity, about sort of grounding ourselves.
Yeah. And like putting a hard thing on it, like
Yes.
I will do this. It's then you're giving your brain something to grab onto that's like, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
And the negative emotion side, or the negative thought side, some people, I guess a lot of people probably don't recognize the constant soundtrack that plays in their head.
Mhm.
And I think of negativity or negative thoughts as like a message of something,
That's right.
right? So yesterday I was cursing at the computer and I went, oh, wait, hold on. Why is this bothering me? It's like, why
Right.
is this making me so mad? Oh, okay. Let's not get mad at it. Let's just fix it.
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes you're like, "Oh, that's because I've skipped lunch and I haven't exercised in 3 days. Okay,
Right?
so now I can
I've been
look at
sitting
this
here too
differently."
long.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the truth, right? Same scenario could happen in a different day and our reaction's totally different. So what's that
Yeah,
about?
exactly. So take it as a signal of not something bad, just like it's trying to tell you something.
Yeah, yeah.
And where can people find your book?
So you can get it on Amazon, pretty much any bookseller. Bookshop.org is one that I like to share about because I think it's really cool. They're a nonprofit that are linked up to local booksellers.
Cool.
So if you want to support, your local independent bookstore, but convenience of ordering online takes a few days longer than Amazon, but it's convenient, and your local bookstores get the sale.
That's
So you
amazing.
just go to bookshop.org, you put in your zip code, they'll find it for you.
Is it
So
only in the US?
that's a good question. I don't know if it's in Canada. There's a good chance it is in Canada, but I haven't checked on that.
That's
I'm gonna have
okay.
to look into that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Amazon, a lot of independent bookstores, some libraries are carrying it. And then on my website, there's a link to the book that'll take you out to Amazon. If you can't remember what it's called, Deal with It Doll.
Deal with
But
it all. Yes, everything's in the show notes.
yeah,
Don't
but
worry.
it's on the website also.
Awesome. That's outstanding. It sounds very, very cool.
Thank you.
I'm totally gonna check it because I love to have lots of tools in my toolbox, you
Love it.
know? And but before you go, my friend, I just always am interested at the very end. Do you have any final words of wisdom?
I'll tell you one of the lessons that I share early on in the book that
Yeah.
came out of my chronic health journey is listen to the whispers. I learned that when I didn't listen to myself, my intuition, even my physical health, my body, usually eventually God would smack me upside the head with a 2x4 when it wasn't listening. But the signs were there. And so that's something that's given me work, gotten better at it as I've gotten older. But that lesson really came to me out of my chronic illness journey, to listen to the whispers. And I think that's part of what we're talking about that emotional health.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's an emotional signpost that we pick up on first. Sometimes it's a physical signpost that we pick up on first. But we do have a deep, innate inner knowing. And I guess that goes back to what we were talking about, but that does require some slowing down
Yeah.
to listen to yourself and to make space for yourself.
Definitely. Yeah. If you're not listening to yourself, that's when you do get smacked with a 2x4.
Yeah. It's nicer to not have to learn that way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's like, okay, I hear you. And you
Yeah,
duck.
exactly.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Christine. It was so great talking with you. Oh my gosh, so many good things, so many good learnings. I really appreciate you coming and hanging out.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. And friends in podcast land, check the show notes because that's where you can find more info on Christine. And if you can't remember, Deal with the Doll is the book, bookshop.org.
Bookshop.org.
Bookshop.org. Support your local booksellers because we love those local bookshops. And if you know someone who needs to deal with it, send them the podcast. Take care, my friends. I'll see you next time.